Gary Epstein has 11 grandchildren. He considered that his major accomplishment. Among his minor accomplishments, he is the head of Greenberg Trorig's global corporate and securities practice, which includes about 400 attorneys in 28 offices. He is the co-head of the firm's Israel practice. He represented the Seminole tribe of Florida in a $1 billion acquisition of Hard Rock Cafe, the first major off-reservation acquisition for a Native American tribe. He represented Live Nation in its recent $130 million deal with Madonna and its deals with U2, Shakira, and Jay-Z. He has never eaten in a Hard Rock Cafe or attended a rock concert. I'm sorry about that. But Gary, the floor is yours. Thank you.
You'll have to forgive me. I'm having post-trauma stress disorder. Before I went to law school decades ago, I taught literature at Iowa State University, and being back on campus and seeing all these young, fresh faces is causing me great trauma. It's deja vu. I was a very, very popular teacher among the students, but not the faculty, because I thought that if people were stupid, they would suffer enough in life without bad grades. So I used to give very high grades, which made me very popular, and then I stopped teaching and went to law school. Bati la'aretz b'yom revi'i b'layla. I came to Israel Wednesday night. There was still a Lehman Brothers. There was still a Merrill Lynch. I did not know that my departure would have a profound impact on the world economy. I feel very guilty and responsible for what's going on over there, and therefore we're going to try very hard to give a productive and meaningful presentation today so that you can all go forth and rebuild the world economy. 10 minutes ago I got an email that Goldman's earnings are down 70%. So, I mean, if it happens to Goldman, there may be no refuge. Potchin b'chvod achsania. We would like to thank Ella Matalon and her terrific staff, Efrat and Aya and the rest of them, for organizing this event in such a professional manner. It is a privilege for our firm to be associated with the MIT Forum, and we look forward to a long and productive association. Thank you, Ella.
Thank you.
As Ella said, Greenberg Traurig is Chevrat Orchei Din, Shel 1,800 Orchei Din. We are in 32 countries, and I and my colleagues Bob Grossman and Meital Stavinsky have been coming to Israel for the last 7 years, since the height of the Second Intifada, with the goal primarily of introducing Israeli companies to our client base of 50,000 clients. And we think we've been very successful, and we hope for greater success in the future. Oleh Hadash yashav b'mirpeset shelo v'ra'a tapuzim be'etz shel shcheno. Amad v'lakach shlosha tapuzim v'hitchil le'echol. Hashachen ra'a v'ratz mebeito v'za'ak Adoni, katuv b'Torah lo tignov. Ha'oleh Hadash chiyech ve'amar li ishto Ma na'im lanu agur ba'artzenu ha'kedosha ochlim tapuzim v'shomim divrei Torah. The essence of that joke is the most important thing that you need to think about is communication and knowledge and getting on the same wavelength with the entity sitting across the table. You and the giant need to be speaking the same language, and I'm going to stress this over and over and over again. The most success comes from positioning yourself across the table and understanding what the other side wants and needs from the transaction. And it is not always antagonistic. Obviously there are always price differentials, obviously there are timing, there are concerns that buyers and sellers have that are different. But if you understand the motivations and needs and goals of the other party, you can compromise in order to achieve your own goals and needs. And only rarely, price being one of them occasionally, are there a direct contradictory interests. So the first thing you need to do as an entrepreneur, and the first part of this seminar, I guess, is about giants, is that you need to understand, you need to gather information about the giants. And you can't have a negotiation strategy without knowledge. It is easy to gather knowledge about the giants, much less so about the entrepreneurs. Most of the giants are public. Most of the giants have done other acquisitions. You need to understand, you need to do research the same way you do in your own field on the entity that's coming to the table with the checkbook or with the stock. What is their acquisition strategy? If I just talk loud, would that be enough, or do I?
I'll turn this down.
No.
If you want to be heard here, give it a try.
See, again, when I was teaching, nobody cared. I think the best lecture I ever gave, I spoke for 40 minutes. I was compelling, I was funny, I was dramatic, I was, if I say so myself, terrific. And when I concluded, I said, does anyone have any questions? And a young lady in the back of the room said, what time is it? So, you need to know the acquisition strategy of the giant. What are they looking for? Are they looking for a technology that would cost them too much or take too long to build? Are they looking for market share? That can you bring market share to them, and what value will that bring? Are they looking for a product? Do they have a distribution network and a gap in their product line that you can provide and add immediate value? I am in the midst of a negotiation right now where the giant has an enormous distribution network, and my client's product would fit right into it. And with almost no additional cost, the purchaser would be able to add a significant amount to its bottom line. My client sells about $5 million worth of goods every year. And it is entirely conceivable that if they sell their company or make a deal with the giant, that $5 million could go to $50 million. What is the giant willing to pay when it's bringing all the value added? It knows that if my client stays independent, the $5 million will go to $6 million, will go to $7 million. It doesn't have the capital to expand. It doesn't have the distribution network. And therefore, the giant has come in and offered a very low amount for a significant equity stake in the company. And my client is offended because it is clearly worth less than what the company is worth now. But at the end of the day, my client would have 51% of a company that might arguably worth 10 times what it's worth today. Those sort of factors, again, what are they looking for? What am I looking for? As Ella said, what are my alternatives? And do I really want to stand on my dignity and honor and say, I will not take a price that's below what I think my company is worth. I would rather wind up with a lower value at the end of the day. And you see that occasionally. I'm accustomed to seeing it in Cubans because I'm in Miami, but I understand Israelis are not all that dissimilar from Cubans. So it happens that there are people let their egos get involved in deals, and they also know what their neighbors got for their exit. And you don't want to be the only person in Ra'anana without 6 exits. So it's tough. Is there? And another anecdote that I can tell is sometimes, again, understanding what the giant is coming to the table with. I had a medical device company that was in the hematology business and conducted an auction, and with all the appropriate players in the medical device business and the doctor's office business, and the leading player was the high bidder. And the entity that was trying to catch up to the leading player couldn't really justify paying a higher price. But I could tell in the course of the negotiation that the leading player in the field wanted to buy the device so that it would not wind up in the hands of the competitor and that it would never come to market. And I told my client, make sure you get enough money up front because you're never going to see a penny of royalties. And they said, you're crazy, our device is so much better than their device. And I said, they don't care. They've got 80% market share. They're going to keep 80% market share for the next 5 years, and they'll pay you $10 million and go away. But you'll make sure you get enough on the downstroke that you're satisfied, because I guarantee you that you're never going to see another penny if you sell it to them. And they sold it to them, and they never saw another penny. And some of them were satisfied, and some of them weren't. But again, the critical element with the oranges and knowing what your neighbor wants is understanding what the motivation, because then you can negotiate effectively. If it's an acquisition, do they typically use stock or cash? What's their multiple? What is their stock? They're not going to pay you a higher multiple than their stock is trading at. There are certain limits. Will they give you freely tradable stock? If their stock is at a 52-week low, that's what it's worth. So when they come in telling you that, don't worry, it's at its 52-week low, it's going to go up, and you're going to make $1 million, you need, and we'll talk later, if I have time, about how to negotiate to protect yourself if you get buyer stock, either through a put or through issuance of additional stock in the future if you're not, if the stock does not go up. What is their culture? How many acquisitions have they completed in the last 2 years? How many negotiations have they been in that have not been completed? Are they anxious to have you talk to people who they've bought in the past? If they're not, worry. If they want you to talk to people that they've acquired in the past, you need to take advantage of that. From the giant side, how do I justify the valuation? It's very interesting that people who work for large corporations have two motivations, and perhaps the greatest one is not to be embarrassed, not to lose their job. We compete for business all the time with giant law firms from New York, and frequently a general counsel will tell us, I will hire you to do my $200 million acquisition and my $500 million acquisition, but when it's a $10 billion acquisition, I'm going to a big New York law firm, because anytime anything can go wrong, and I want to be able to go to the board of directors and say, hey, I hired Cravath, Swaine and Moore. It's protection. You need to understand that the person on the opposite side of the table does not want to buy a company that doesn't succeed, because their career is on the line. So you want to get rich, and they want to keep their job. And they don't want to be embarrassed. How do I make sure when I'm negotiating with an entrepreneur that they are not just using me to establish a price and shopping to the competition? How do I make sure that the necessary personnel stays around and stays committed, and that I'm getting the necessary personnel? Who's really the brains of the outfit? How can I make sure that I'm licensing the right product line? Should I pay for value that I create if I'm an OEM or if I'm a distributor? And one critical concern that entrepreneurs frequently don't think about, are these people going to be able to maintain accounting controls? If I'm compliant with Sarbanes-Oxley, do they really, is the accounting in good order? And one of the most important things when you go into a negotiation is that you look professional, that you know how to play the game, that you've got the right accountants, certainly the right lawyers, that you understand that is the due diligence already arranged in a data room in a form that they can come in, that you've already know exactly what their lawyers and business people are going to ask for. Here's the due diligence available. That's going to give them a tremendous level of comfort. They want to know whether you're sophisticated enough to negotiate a standard contract. Ed is going to talk in a minute about what is negotiable and what's not negotiable. And it's important to the giant to know that the entrepreneur understands what's negotiable and what's not negotiable. Am I going to have to restate their financial statements? If you know their concerns and you address their concerns before they raise them, you raise the chance of having a successful negotiation. Both sides need to know not only what their objectives are, but what the objectives of the other party are in order to have a successful negotiation. And you also need to know what is the absolute minimum that you need to get from the deal, and to draw a line and say, if I can't get this, I walk. But if I can get this, notwithstanding the fact that I haven't gotten anything, I can achieve my objectives and go on. No one is typically trying to insult anyone in these transactions. No one is trying to cheat anyone. You simply need to determine, putting emotion aside, whether this, and again, Ella sort of said this, you need to determine whether this is a deal that you want to do or need to do. Are you better off with the deal on the table, as bad as it is, or without a deal at all? So, and of course you need to know what your alternatives are and what the giant's alternatives are. One of the giant's great advantages is typically they don't have to do a deal. Ein Breira is not a good position to be in. The giant rarely is in that position. The entrepreneur is. You may do a deal at a lower valuation to get to enable you to get to the next stage. Is it better for my client to go from 5 to 7 to 9 and own 100% of the company, or to go from 5 to 50 and own 51% of the company? What's your gut? Which one do you think they should stay independent and grow organically and slowly, as opposed to 49? What they're actually asking is 49 and an option for the other 51. and if you want to know, the option is whatever price they determine. So I mean, yeah, there is always a negotiation, and there always is. But the question is, are you willing to take less? Clearly less than the other side acknowledges it's less. General Electric, I shouldn't mention names, it's being taped. Cancel that. Some company, very famous, used to come to the table, they're a client, I'm embarrassed, used to come to the table and say, yeah, we may be offering somewhat less than somebody else, but simply associating with us is going to make your company more valuable. And it was quite conceivably true. It was the client didn't want to hear it. Why should I sell it for less to them just because they're a big company? Because sometimes they bring value added. I mean, if you can get an investment from Ed Molovsky, that means something. It means they've gone through a due diligence. It means that they've done your... They haven't shopped around. I was going to say Kleiner Perkins, but Ed's sitting here. In any event, there is no transaction that happens that doesn't involve some level of mutual benefit. Zen neheneh v'zen neheneh makes sense. Zen neheneh v'zen lo neheneh, the deal doesn't happen. And you need to keep that in mind. It is rare that both sides have equal bargaining power, but the assumption of this session is that the giant is always going to have greater leverage, and we hope to demonstrate ways... How much time do I have left?
5-7 minutes.
5-7 minutes. In the next 5 to 7 minutes, I will show you how to level the playing field. The first technique is knowledge. You need to understand, you have to have market savvy. We met an Israeli company called Evogene that you people have been reading about in the newspapers some time ago, for quite some while. They were designing genes for plants, not clothing, but the other kind of gene, so that for agricultural purposes. Better taste, endurance, yield. All of a sudden, they were designing genes for plants to increase the oil content for biofuels. Why? Because they looked at the market and they said that's what the market is demanding. They just did a very significant deal. They did a deal with I know Monsanto, I'm trying to remember the Israeli company, Ormat. They did a deal with Ormat with respect to the biofuels. They did a huge deal with Monsanto just now. And that's one way. How does Evogene negotiate with Monsanto? A small company against giant company. Because Monsanto is undoubtedly scared that Evogene is going to do a deal with Pioneer, another giant. If you create a competition, or if you create the appearance of competition, which involves an element of dishonesty occasionally, if you make them think that they are in an auction, and that if they don't get it, their competitor is going to get it, you sort of put a giant in your corner. So you can help by examining the market. I'll skip that. In a bargaining power, if you are a seller, there is a curve which is definable, and any professional will describe it to you. The seller's power is strongest immediately before you sign a letter of intent. You have management presentations. Everybody wants to take you to the dance. You are very attractive. You have a great technology. You have good management. They've seen nothing but what you've wanted to show them, and your stock goes up to here. At that point, you sign a letter of intent granting one party exclusivity, like that. And the reason is, you know, you've taken yourself off the market, and you have granted exclusivity to one party who is now going to look through your underwear, hoping to find bad things that will lower the price. No? Doesn't agree. We're going to have a heated discussion later. If you are the buyer, if you are the seller, you want to create as much competition or the appearance of competition as possible. If you are the buyer, you want to get to a letter of intent that gives you exclusivity for as long as possible while you look at the company. If you're the seller, because the letter of intent is going to grant exclusivity, you want it to be detailed as possible. You want it to have a price. You want the due diligence to go very quickly. You want to have benchmarks for when you get a draft of the contract, when they finish due diligence. You want very few open doors for the buyer to walk away. If you're the buyer, you have exclusive now, you're in there, you're doing due diligence, you want as much time as possible, and you want as much flexibility as possible. One strategy that I've used in the past is give the buyer exclusivity for a period of 90 days, provided that either party can terminate without liability if the buyer hasn't delivered a draft of a purchase contract within X days. Keep them moving towards the goal. If the buyer ever proposes a lower purchase price, exclusivity terminates. Keep them where they originally were when you first chose them. If you fail to execute a definitive agreement within X days, exclusivity terminates. You want the process to move, and you want to level the playing field. Makes the buyer keep his promises. Let's talk about conditions to closing. Here's what the buyer is going to want. I will buy your company subject to satisfactory due diligence. That is, if after I kick the tires, I still want it. What you want is, or the entrepreneur wants, is you must close if my earnings are what I told you they were, or unless there's a material adverse change. The buyer is going to want, I'll close subject to financing. There may not be any financing anymore, but what you want is a commitment letter, or a letter from a bank that says it's confident that the financing is there, or a buyer that has the financing. Buyer is going to propose subject to board approval. You never agree to that. Their board can approve, their board can disapprove. You want to make sure that they're able to do the deal up front. Material adverse change, and maybe Philip's going to talk about that later, but what is a material adverse change? Is it the market going down 500 points and Lehman and Merrill going out of business? Not if you negotiate properly. Material adverse change is something bad that happens to your company, not that happens to general economic conditions. I didn't know how long this was going to take. The other thing that Ella raised is confidentiality. Let's be clear. Once you have shown something to someone, they know it. So the issue is whether you can keep them from using it, whether you can get the information back, whether you can keep them from soliciting your employees. What I've found, again, as a way to level the playing field, is to open the kimono slowly, to provide the information that they need to go forward to make a meaningful decision, but to preserve really confidential, especially when you're dealing with a strategic buyer or a private equity buyer that has a company, a portfolio company in the same business. Avoid showing them a customer list. You can show them revenues. You avoid showing them pricing, but you may show them margins. There's all kinds of things that you feel comfortable showing them, and some things that you just would rather preserve until the deal has advanced to a very late stage. One very contentious point dealing with private equity companies is attempting to keep them from ganging up against you. The entrepreneur wants to establish an auction atmosphere or some competitive spirit in the marketplace. When they gang up on you and co-venture to make the investment, it hurts the valuation. Finally, there are people out there actively sourcing acquisitions, and therefore there are opportunities out there. And one of the important things is how to get noticed, because there's a lot of noise out there, and there are a lot of ideas out there, and there are obvious ways and less obvious ways. Industry groups, trade shows, professionals, VCs, networks. I know this is self-serving, but I'm going to say it anyway. You really need to understand the value of having the right team. The giant does not want to go outside its comfort zone. So if your accountant is your brother-in-law from Afula, and your law firm is your sister-in-law from Hadera, it's not that they're going to assume that their big shot law firm is going to beat up your lawyer. They're going to assume that it's going to be very hard to get a deal done, because people are going to be arguing about things they shouldn't be arguing about. When we entered the market in Israel, we had no way of finding which companies had credibility that would allow us to introduce them to our clients. So we simply went to the best law firms in Israel and said, which of your clients would you recommend for introductions? And immediately those clients had credibility by association with quality firms. If anyone wants to hear the rest of my speech, and I don't recommend it, see me later. Maybe the ending. And I end where I began, which is always good. Always, always, always put yourself in the position of the person across the table. What are their concerns, their fears, their goals? If you understand them, you can address them. Am I back on time? Here we go.
Thank you very much, Gary.